I'm going to start this video off by saying I liked Starfield. Yes, go ahead and crucify me at the stake because I liked mid, okay? But for real though, it is weird as Starfield both scratched an itch I had while also leaving me with another itch it failed to scratch. Whether that be the lack of being able to command a fleet of ships you've commandeered, or the lack of a war between the governments, and no, I'm not counting that Crimson Fleet space battle even though that was epic, or just a simple lack of, I don't know, interesting things to run into as you travel planets. While it is cool that Starfield has a lot of star systems you can explore with a ton of different planets you can land on, that cool factor is cut in half when you realize about 80% of those planets are full of nothing burgers, with the most interesting thing on any of those planets either being a bandit camp you can clear out, or one of them just happening to be the planet chosen to house one of the Unity's artifacts. But still, I'd be lying if I said I didn't get my money's worth out of Starfield, as I have put in a humble 85 hours into the game, and I like to subscribe to the doctrine that $1 equals 1 hour of gameplay. And yes, I know that doctrine doesn't apply to every single game out there, as there are exceptions, but for open world games that promises a big story within a big world with a lot of quests and characters to interact with, I believe that doctrine should apply. And while it does apply to the base game and fulfills that criteria, the same cannot be said about the new expansion that just recently released for the game, Shattered Space. I'm gonna give you guys a disclaimer right now, I did not play Shattered Space, and I do not intend to until it's a reasonable price, whether that be from a discount or a markdown. Like most gamers, I watched a review in regards to the latest expansion, and needless to say, I was disheartened about what I heard. Mostly about the fact that the main story of the DLC only takes about 5 hours to complete, and some people beat the whole thing in around 10 hours. Remember that doctrine I said earlier? About $1 to 1 hour of gameplay? Buddy, the DLC costs $30 freaking dollars. Almost half of Starfield, because now gaming companies want to bleed us more dry by upping the prices of their games. I'm sorry, but Shadow of the Erdtree has officially spoiled me. If you want me to pay good money like $30 for DLC, you're gonna actually have to make it more worth the dime. And don't make me feel like some used sock. I'm talking new and unique weapons and armor, a new story, likable and hateable NPCs, and a world that's actually interesting to traverse in and not barren as fuck. Don't get me wrong though, I'd love to play the DLC as it explores one big looming question that was left unanswered in the base game, and that is, where is House Veron? Or Veron? Veron? Doesn't matter. A question I myself wanted to see answered. And low-key kinda knew it was gonna be a DLC thing anyways, cause that's just how Bethesda be, but anyways, that answer is locked behind a $30 paywall. And the question we gotta ask ourselves, is that $30 going to be worth it? From what I've seen and heard, it isn't. In my opinion. I mean, you can even take a look at the Steam review page and see that it's sitting at a mostly negative review score at the time I'm recording this video. Though I should mention that it did fluctuate back to mixed a little while ago, so I don't know, it might be fluctuating still. So look at it at your own leisure. And I thought it'd be fitting if we look at a negative, neutral, and positive review about this expansion, and see for ourselves what people are saying about this DLC. I'll start with the negative first, the neutral next, and the positive last. That way we can end on a positive, so we can give some much needed leeway for Shattered Space. Though to be honest, I don't think it's gonna do it much good. But I guess we're gonna have to wait and see as we jump into our first review right here. Now don't let the thumbs up fool you, because I promise you, this is a negative review. And you're gonna see why in a moment. As the reviewer states, this DLC is an improvement over some of the weaker areas of the base game. Allowing for the devs to spend more time in a smaller area has predictably led to an improvement in the environmental storytelling. It also made it more entertaining to actually move through the city, check all of the buildings, and engage with the world. To save some time, in the second paragraph, he basically says that the narrative is good, but it's very Bethesda-esque. After which he essentially says the good and the bad, with the good basically saying that they like the narrative, Easter eggs, and environment in the DLC. That and Andrea is their favorite companion, and they find House Veron to be interesting. And the bad essentially says that they're disappointed with how little the NPCs actually interact with Andrea, and that none of the NPCs actually directly address her. They also essentially say that they feel like they're just talking to a reskinned NPC from another faction based off the responses they give, which is weird as this is supposed to be a civilization that is separated from the rest of humanity. Now at the bottom of the review, what I need to see to keep a positive rating. With all that being said, I still think this DLC is a massive improvement for a game that I am really hoping to see pick itself up. What I need from this DLC is that by the end, please allow for new game mechanics. Can we occupy and build our own space station station? Become the leaders of House Veron? I need to see something added with this DLC beyond a slightly improved story experience to justify purchasing it. I have intentionally avoided any and all spoilers or deep dives for this DLC, whether it was turning into a vampire or becoming a raider boss. Bethesda's DLCs have generally always had something. If at the end of this we get 1 or 2 additional and compelling game mechanics, I will amend my review and give a final verdict. And ladies and gentlemen, what do you think his final verdict was? Well, if you guessed poo poo caca, you were correct. Aww. As he states quite clearly, edit after finishing, okay, this is not good. Especially not for $30. There are plenty of others providing a thorough analysis, so I won't bother. I'm incredibly disappointed. It's a short, glitchy, boring DLC. The story, while starting well, the space station, quickly devolves into the usual Starfield nonsense. Do not buy. I gotta say, wow. I mean, you know, after reading all that, honestly, I thought he had a good outlook on the DLC. I mean, in the review, he seemed to be really enjoying it. He did say that he liked the narrative. He did say that he liked the environments. So I wonder what changed his opinion like that. But to be honest, I can probably stomach a guess, as Starfield is a buggy piece of mess. That's like actually really sad to hear, given that this game has now been out for like a year and there's still bugs. Listen, I ran into some annoying bugs when I first started playing the game, and when I mean annoying, I mean soft locking your game annoying. So the frustration about bugs being present in the DLC is not lost on me. Now let's look at the neutral review. As you can see, this guy wrote a lot. So I'll do my best to summarize some of his points. So at the beginning of his review, you can see that he titles it as a missed opportunity. And then we move on to the pros he states. With the first pro being Darza, the place you explore in the DLC, is large, interesting, and has a lot to explore. His second point being that the quest designs in the DLC are pretty good, with one in particular standing out due to it having an element where you actually have to solve the quest by yourself if you want to get the true ending to it, which I always like as it makes you be more immersed into the game. His third point being that he likes the new enemies that were added, that adds more flavor to the faction. And his last pro is that you get lots of XP from the DLC. Now let's quickly switch on over to see what cons he gave the DLC. As we can see, he added 3 cons, but you see at the bottom there's missed opportunities, so if we add those into the mix, it technically becomes 6 cons. So starting from the top, in his first con, he basically says that the main story is contrived and that some of the quests are poor in design and boring at times too. His second con is that the accents the characters have in the DLC can break immersion at times due to how they sound, which I gotta say for the record is probably a very subjective con. Thirdly on his con list is that you basically get jack shit for finishing the main quest. Now for his missed opportunities list, which I'm also counting as cons cause yeah. In his first point, he says that literally nothing carries over to the base game. His second point was that he was let down that they didn't do more with the introductory dungeon. And lastly, nothing was added for ships or outposts other than the hab design. And lastly, we'll read off his conclusion, which states, basically, it's more of the same Starfield content with nothing new or innovative that will change how you play the game. It's a faction quest line for $40, albeit a beefy faction quest. If I could vote neutral, I would. It's an alright DLC if overpriced, but it's not the DLC the game needed right now. Voting recommended to counter the review bombs. Now, I really like this guy's review because, of course, it's a neutral review that gives a fair and honest take on both sides. I think he does a good job at listing his personal reasons as to why he thinks stuff is a pro and personal reasons as to why he thinks stuff are cons. It's also cool that he added the missed opportunities section in his review as well, though. I mean, personally, I think those are just cons, in my opinion. I mean, if it's a missed opportunity, that doesn't really sound good to me, right? So, could have probably just added that in the con list, but you know, one point I do want to mention about this review though is what I find interesting is the part in regards to, you know, a pro being more experience from the dungeons. I mean, me personally, I don't really see that as a pro, given how Starfield is structured and how long the game has been out. So I think players that are returning to this game aren't really worried about levels, but you know, I won't take it away from him. If it's a pro, it's a pro, you know? Anyways, we're now going to move on to the positive review about the DLC, which I'm really curious to see what this individual had to write. I spent the weekend slow playing this DLC and I'm glad I did. The good. Overall environment and sound design was excellent, particularly the soundtrack and ambient sounds. The point of interest were numerous and the new dungeons were fun and challenging. I particularly liked the zero-G locations and teleporting enemies, which were the perfect foil for my FaceTime ability. The bad. The leadership skill bug that prevents companions like Andreja from speaking their unique dialogue is a known issue that has plagued the game since launch and should be a priority fix. The ugly. The false ending, in quotes, that reloads your last save is lazy and should have led to a new Unity, at least for players who have accessed the Unity already one or more times on a save. The new weapons and armor sets are nice, and the scarf set is particularly thematic as it reminds me of a still suit from Dune, which is a nice touch for a group who shares many of the same cult-like aspects of the religious fanatics in that story. I appreciate the number of traits and skills that could be used as modifiers for dialogue, and Bethesda should continue to prioritize that kind of interactivity. I was on New Game Plus 14 and had many skills at rank 4. I saw dialogue options for Serpent's Embrace, Security, Theft, Persuasion, Deception, Intimidation, and Manipulation. Good stuff. My favorite moments actually came from side quests, particularly two that are given from the Med Center. I'm a music junkie and it was fun to get a different ending to the second quest because I used a miscellaneous item from my inventory at the right time. Some of the dungeons were real nail-biters on very hard difficulty, even with 85 plus levels of skills/gear and full Starborn powers. As to the notion that the main story assumes you are a chosen one, bringing Barrett along will disabuse you of that notion. Both of you can hear the main antagonist of the story because both of you, canonically, have touched the artifacts and experienced their primary effects firsthand. If I had to give the DLC a number rating, I'd give it a solid 8, modified by the usual jank and bugged leadership skill. Alright, I like that review, mainly because I like reading good stuff about a game rather than bad stuff, because shockingly, I want games to do good. This may come as a shock to some people, but I'm actually not secretly praying for the downfall of games, especially Bethesda games, and especially Starfield. I mean shit, I put 85 hours into that sucker. I wanted this DLC to succeed. And like I said at the beginning of this video, the main reason I'm not going to buy it, right now at least, is due to the price point. Because while this positive review does allow me to see the DLC in a brighter light, ultimately, it hasn't convinced me to get it. As one huge thing this review didn't mention is what effect this DLC does or doesn't have in the base game. Because you see, the faction that you deal with in this DLC, it's a pretty big deal that you run into them at all. Because as far as the rest of the Starfield universe is concerned, they don't know what happened to these people. So given that this guy didn't mention any effect in regards to the base game, while the negative reviews did, it's safe to say that the DLC doesn't really impact the base game and its NPCs. Which I know for some people isn't going to be a big deal, as you obviously usually play game DLCs after having beaten the base game, and rarely do you actually tend to go back to the base game afterwards anyways, but it's a big deal to me as I love the immersion factor that comes with that sort of stuff. And Starfield to me is a game I want to be immersed in, and I fucking was, given that I put 85 hours into it. Ultimately, there was a missed opportunity to potentially turn the discovery of the Veron faction into this big overarching quest involving the other two big factions of the game, but alas! It appears the DLC was riddled with many missed opportunities, so can't really be sad there. It is what it is. I'm personally going to wait until the DLC is around $15 or $10 before I go ahead and purchase it, as based off the reviews that we just read together, that's the price point that would be worth it to me. But with that, I just have one question left for you beautiful people, and that's, do y'all agree with me? Are you also going to wait until the price is lower? Or have you already bought it and are having the time of your lives with it? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, if you liked the video and want to hear more from me, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Well folks, that's going to be that for my little mulling session. I look forward to talking to y'all again in the next one. I'm Mayhem, and I'm signing off. Peace!